everyone for joining another week of In Rhythm's Lightning Talks. For those of you who are new here and do not know who I am Jen Crawford. I am the head of talent here at In Rhythm, and I also have the pleasure of co-hosting this space alongside our practice area consultants. In Rhythm's Lightning Talks, they happen weekly at 5:15 p.m. Eastern. It's a place for our practice area consultants to teach back to the In Rhythm community at large, as well as with our fellow viewers on LinkedIn and then further down the road on YouTube. This week, I have the pleasure of co-hosting this space with Wei Fei, and he is going to be talking about Sequelize ORM. So super excited. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Wei Fei.
Hi, thank you. So as Jen mentioned, my name is Wei Fei. I'll be going through a basic overview of Sequelize ORM. A little bit of background. I first encountered Sequelize when I was working on the weekly engagement report project through In Rhythm Labs. And there, Toph, a fellow developer, had used it in the API. But as he transitioned off, I slowly got to update the API as well. And I haven't heard of Sequelize before, but as I got more familiar with it, I realized how useful it actually is. And I just wanted to take some time to share it out with you so that the next time you are in a project that's using Node, you'll be able to see if Sequelize would be a right tool for you as well. So let's get started with the agenda. So in the agenda, we'll start off with what is Sequelize, and then we will talk about why you should use Sequelize. And lastly, we'll do a little bit of a demo and jump into the code a bit and show you how to use Sequelize. So first, what is Sequelize? So it's a project-based Node.js ORM tool. Let's break that down a little bit. Promise is an event, a Node.js event, which produces a result in the future. This result is usually a success or a failure. And the reason why promises are useful is because they are asynchronous and they do make the code a little bit cleaner, as well as they can handle the error pretty well. So the error handling is, you can identify exactly where the error happens, and it's just really good for troubleshooting and making sure that the code is cleaner. Next, we have, I guess, Node.js is in there as well. So Node.js is a back-end JavaScript runtime. Right now, Sequelize can only be used with Node.js. That is one of the disadvantages of Sequelize. And lastly, ORM. ORM means Object Relational Mapper, and it is a tool to convert the data from a relational database into a programmatic object for manipulation by a programmer. So basically, it converts the table structure of a relational database into an object structure so that you can use it, and you can use like methods and properties within the object. Next, we'll go into why we want to use Sequelize. So Sequelize, ORMs usually reduce the amount of code that's needed to be written, so it saves developers time. And one way to do that is to use that Sequelize CLI, which is the command line interface. So using that, you can create new tables quickly, and I'll be showing you a demo of that later on. Next, we can also be used to create and manage your database through migrations. And migrations are basically a way for you to create the tables and move the tables to different databases as well. Another thing is that it is it supports many different SQL databases, most of the more popular ones as well, including Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, SQLite, and Microsoft's SQL package. And because it's used in so many databases, if you are using a project with Node and a relational database, it is likely that you could use Sequelize in your project as well. Next, we have fewer typos. So on the screen here, so I guess I used to use like query drivers to connect to the database, and what you see in that screenshot is basically how I would have done it or connected to the database without Sequelize, and it's just like it's a huge block of text, and it's pretty easy to have like a typo in there somewhere, and you wouldn't figure it out until you run it and find that something went wrong. Versus in Sequelize, because you do have like IntelliSense, and a lot of the objects are, or a lot of the properties and variables are already defined. If you misspell something, it will flag it, so you can fix it on the fly. Next, it's more secure. So Sequelize does help with SQL injection vulnerabilities by just mapping your objects and actions onto SQL for you, so that you don't have to write that like huge block of text, and they wouldn't be able to like inject code into your SQL query. Even though there is some security there, you should still sanitize your inputs even when using Sequelize. But Sequelize does provide another layer of protection, so that does help as well. And lastly, we have that there is an active community on GitHub and Stack Overflow, so there's more updates. And so if you do run into an issue, someone else probably has run into that before, or there will be people who are using this this tool, so they can probably help you out. And it's good to have some assurance that you're not the only one using this tool. Okay, so next we'll talk about how to use Sqlize. So I wanted to go over some of the key concepts of Sqlize before we jump into the code. So first we have model. So a model is an abstraction that represents a table in your database. So basically a model in Sqlize would be a table in the relational database. It determines the name of the table, it determines the columns that the tables have, and all sorts of different table properties. Next, we have migrations. I guess we talked a little bit about that before, but it's used to keep track of all the changes in your database. And you can use it to transfer your current models to different databases. So if you were using Postgres before and you realize you might want to use MySQL instead, it's pretty easy to migrate over your table and your data to another database. And last thing in the key concept is associations. So associations are a way to define your relationship between the tables and to map or identify the foreign keys as well. This is used for your table joining and determining the relationship, I guess, between the tables. So I guess, yeah, let's look at the demo. I think I wanted to just demo a few things today. Migrating databases, Sqlize, using the Sqlize command line interface, and running a few queries. So let's do that. So jumping into the code. So first thing I wanted to talk about is the config JSON. So what you're seeing here is that is basically the database information. So so you can define all the database credentials here. So database name, host name, username, password, and a dialect is what you use to choose which database you're using. So right now we're using Postgres, but you can also use MySQL, MariaDB, or any of the other options that we mentioned before. So next, we can talk about the models. So the models, as we talked about before, they're an abstraction of the table. So everything that you can do in a table, you can do in a SQL model. So instead of having that structure of the rigid table, you have objects now. So let's say that we have a product model. So this is a table called product, and we want to initialize the columns. So these will be the columns that the product table would have. So we'll have the product ID, the SKU, name, price, and then you'll also have what kind of data type this column is. So right now the ID would just be an int. It's also a primary key, and we want to increment it. And then the SKU will be string, name is string, and the price is a double. You can also determine what exactly is the name of the table here. And then Sqlize is your instance of Sqlize. So it will hold the database information as well as all the model information. So everything you need would be included in the Sqlize object. So one cool thing I wanted to show you is the client or command line interface. So all this, I didn't really, so these are all like auto-generated actually. So I can show you how using Sequelize can save time by creating a new table. So right now we only have two tables here. We have a store table and a product table. And now we can create this table called items. So what you would write here in the command line is npx Sequelize, and then you can specify that you're generating a new model. So model generate, and then you can specify the name of your table. We could call it items or item, and then you can add attributes, which includes the column name and column definitions. So in this item table, we want to have, let's say we want to have a description of the item, and that could be a string. We want the name to be a string as well. We want to have the price, double. And then we want to have, we can have like is or is in stock, and that could be a Boolean. So if we enter here, so you see that we just created a model and a migration. I guess we can talk about migration afterwards, but in this item, you can see that it just created this table where the name is item, it is Sqlize, and here are all our columns. We can also add more columns if we wanted to. So yeah, it just saves a lot of time if you wanted to create a new table. And I guess migration. So it also created a migration. And what that does is it's an object with two methods. So one's an up method and one's a down method. An up method is usually something you can use to create a table in a database. So for example, this stores migration, we can create a stores table with the fields that we identified before, and then down would just revert that change, so it would drop the table. That's called stores. And like the item, it just creates it for you so that you can just basically just plug it in and it'll create a table. So I can show you how that works. So I have PG admin open up. I just have the UI here just so that it's a lot easier to just show and see what's going on. So right now in this table, we only have one table called Sequelize meta. Technically, you can delete this, but I had it in there initially, so it's just here. and it will just store all your migrations, all the C data that you have run. I can show you that later, but for now, let's just run the migration so that it can populate all these tables for you. I think I saved it before. Okay, so the command for that is npx Sequelize db migrate, and when you click it, it will migrate all these tables for you into the database. So if you refresh the tables, you'll see that there are now 4 tables for the items, products, and all that. And you can see that there's columns in here as well. And these are the ones that we defined previously. And we can actually take a look at Sequelize meta to just see what that holds. So yeah, so it actually holds all the migration files so that when you revert it, it'll check the meta and just know exactly what to revert. So if you had something before that wasn't migrated, it wouldn't touch that. So that's just cool to know. Along with migrations, we also have seeders. So these are like a way to throw in seed data into your tables. So a lot of times, like in projects I worked on before, every time we have like an update, or if the infrastructure has to be restarted, all the table data will be gone. So a quick way to just repopulate the seed data would be to have these seeders. And what this one is doing is it's just inserting into the stores table these seed data fields. So we'll just populate the rows in here. So we can actually use this command npx Sequelize CLI db seed all, and it will run through all of these seed files and populate the tables with that. So we can see that happen here. So I think if we try to query one of the, I guess the store file, since we had that open, where's the query? So if we query, okay, and then you can see that the seed data does appear right here. So it's just a quick way to populate data as well as populate the tables with the CLI. And you can also remove all of them. So you can undo to migrate, undo to see data, and then it will just remove it for you. So if you refresh this now, oh wait, what happened? Did I press the wrong thing? Hold up. I might have, oh, I did it again. But there is a command for undoing the C data, which, yeah, so it just has an undo in here. So dbc undo all. I have to do this twice because I did it twice. So once it's undone, we should not see anything in here. Okay, yeah. We can also undo the migration as well, so there would be nothing in the, okay. So now there should only be the Sqlize meta table in here. So yep, the Sqlize meta table, and the meta table shouldn't have anything in here as well. So yeah, so this is just really useful if you wanted to rebuild tables after every infrastructure change, or if you wanted to move to a new database, all you had to do was change the database information and the dialect in your config JSON, and then just link it up to a new database, and you can run your migrations and your seeders, and you'll have the same exact setup in your new database. So we talked about if you had like no database and you wanted to start to use Sqlize from the beginning and just create those databases yourself. But there are situations where the database has already been created and you just want to create some APIs to connect to them. And you could do that with Sequelize as well. I'm just going to jump over to the project, what is it called? Engagement report project that we did for In Rhythm Labs. And in there, we actually had to connect to an existing database. And I can show you how we did that here. One thing you'll notice is that there are a bunch of types, and this is because we're using TypeScript in our project. So there is a bunch of additional lines of code in here just to determine like the type of the function, the type of the columns. So yeah, now you know that Sequelize is usable in TypeScript, so definitely supports that. We also have associations, and I think we briefly talked about it before, but they're the ways to know that different tables are connected with each other. So the table structure we have in our project, we basically have a report table, and that report table can have multiple sections, section tables or sections. And each section can have multiple headers, and each header has multiple bullets. So that is the structure that we have here, where the association is all one-to-many. So we're just looking at the header model right now, just to see a more simple example. And in this header model, we'll see that there is, these are the columns. So we just initialize the columns, and you can see that there's a field property here, and this maps to the column in our SQL database. So if we define the field, then it does check for the column in SQL, and then maps our Sequelize column into that as well. We also map the table name into the Sequelize. So, or this existing table is in the SQL database, and we just map this this entire model to that. So that's how we can connect to a existing SQL database. And let's look at some queries actually. So these are some queries for the header. And one thing you can notice here is also that we do have a association, and this is like has many associations. So the way this is read is that the header model has many bullets associated with it, and you can connect it with a foreign key. And this would be the name. So I guess I'll talk about it later on, but for eager loading, you actually use this association to help you with your join table. So first we have this find all function, and you should note that in our model that we defined, like this model that we just defined here, there are inherent properties like find all, which helps us do our SQL queries. So a good thing about this is that it does have some help text for you to figure out how to even use this. So for example, the example that they have here, so in this model, they want to find all instances or rows in the model where this property or the column attribute 1 is 42 and attribute 2 is cake. So it's pretty easy to read here. And I guess like if you're using a different way of like query drivers in order to write your queries, it's all text. So there's no like help text, and if you get your syntax wrong, then you probably have to do some research and figure out what the actual syntax is. Well, in here it's just a lot easier because it just shows you how to even use this. And and so like if you misspell it, let's say, it'll just flag it as a misspelling, and it'll suggest maybe you mean to find, oh, and you just correct it here. So it just helps with troubleshooting and typos. So in this case, we are finding all instances of the header model. And because there's no like where clause, it's literally finding all of the header models. We do have includes, and this does have to do with eager loading. And eager loading is basically a way for you to load all of the information that I guess that is associated with the header. So using the association, it will look for every bullet model that has a header ID that corresponds to the specific header, and return the entire bullet model of that. So let me show you how that looks, because it's kind of hard to explain. So in here, so I'm using Postman to run the or interact with the API here. I think I have header section. Okay, so in here we do have some sections here. Let's just say that this is grabbing all of the report header sections, and we do have this report section bullet. I think that corresponds to the name in here. Yeah, so it corresponds to the name in there, and there it will get all. These are basically the bullet models. So it will join the bullet model and get all of the information from there and make it an array. So you'll just have all the pertinent information for all your associations if you just use the include. Let's see. And we can look at a few more. I guess find one. We do have a where clause here. So we are filtering our what we just saw before. We're just filtering on headers that match the ID that we're given. And then we also do the include, so that will bring in all our bullets as well. Creating, so yeah, I guess these are pretty similar. We do have the eager loading, but I guess one thing I did wanted to show is that there are like quite a few, actually, there's quite a few just methods in here that you can use just because you are using Sqlize, and it's built into the model itself. So if you wanted to, you could use the like find or create, and then you can figure out the options and then fill that out. So there's a lot of options that you can do using your model, and they're all like auto-generated. So it just helps with making your queries more readable, as well as making them, well, knowing what options you have for them as well. Yeah, I guess that was what I had prepared for the demo. So I can hold on, still share the screen, but go back to the presentation. Okay. Next, I have additional learning. So what I found helpful was that before going to the Sqlize documentation, I was able to follow like a Medium article called a Guide to ORM Sequelize, as well as follow a SQL tutorial just to make my first SQL application or Sequelize application and connect it to a SQL database. So the thing about the the official documentation is that there is like a lot of in-depth detail, and it might be a bit hard to really understand how everything fits together unless you have used it before. So I would probably suggest if you want to learn more about Sequelize, trying to create that SQL documentation, or try to create a quick SQL application first with just the basics, and then you can jump into further detail about what you can do, about what methods there are on the model, and work from there. And yeah, so any questions